India, a land steeped in history, culture, and tradition. A nation where faith runs deep, where communities bind together, and where people trust each other, often blindly. From the bustling streets of Delhi to the serene temples in Varanasi, the land pulses with the echoes of centuries-old values. It is a country where kindness is celebrated, where rituals speak to the soul, and where every gesture is infused with meaning. Yet in the shadow of this great civilization, a darker truth lingers. In a land where trust is the foundation of every bond, there exists a lurking horror, one that cannot be perceived through the lens of tradition or faith. For amid the bustling cities, quiet villages, and holy places, there are those whose minds become twisted beyond comprehension. These are the people who walk among us, seemingly normal, yet capable of monstrous acts. They are the quiet ones, the unassuming faces, the people who blend in so seamlessly that no one suspects the evil that brews within them. Amarjeet Sada, a name that, when spoken, sends a chill down the spine. His case is one that no one could ever have imagined. A child, barely 7 years old, accused of brutally murdering at least 3 children. A boy still in the grip of childhood innocence. Yet his mind had become the playground for darkness. As a counselor, I had seen my fair share of troubled minds. But Amarjeet's case was different. There was a chilling vacancy in his eyes, a void where empathy should have been. I remember the first time I sat across from him, his small, almost delicate frame, hands folded in his lap. His gaze was distant, like he had already detached himself from any reality I could understand. At first, I thought it was just a case of a disturbed child, perhaps a victim of circumstances. I had heard the rumors, how he had been abandoned, how poverty and neglect had shaped his world. But as the sessions progressed, I realized that the story was far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Amarjeet spoke little at first, but when he did, it was with an eerie calmness. The words came without emotion, as though he were recounting a routine event. "I killed them," he said once, his voice monotone, devoid of guilt or remorse. "It was easy. I wanted to see what would happen." Those words have haunted me ever since. As the sessions continued, I began to learn more about the twisted logic behind his actions. Amarjeet wasn't driven by anger or rage, as one might expect. No, his was a cold, clinical detachment, a desire to experiment, to understand the mechanics of death. The horror of it all wasn't in the killings themselves, but in the way he spoke of them, as if they were no more significant than the death of a fly. Amarjeet had grown up in a world of violence and indifference. His family was poor, struggling to make ends meet. His father was absent, his mother overwhelmed by the harshness of life. In this environment, he found no compassion, no guidance, no love. Yet there was something else in him, something darker, something that even his circumstances couldn't fully explain. It was as if his mind had been cracked open, and instead of filling it with compassion, it had been filled with a grotesque curiosity. I thought I understood the workings of the human mind, its capacity for good and evil. But Amarjeet shattered that understanding. He wasn't just a child who had been damaged by neglect. No, there was something intrinsically wrong with him, a darkness that cannot be explained away by poverty, abuse, or neglect. When I asked him why he killed, he answered with such chilling simplicity, "Because I wanted to. I wanted to feel something." The desire to feel, that was what haunted me. Here was a child, barely 7, who had already shut off any semblance of emotion. For him, death was not a tragedy, but an experiment, a means to understand the limits of his power over life. But the true horror wasn't just in his actions. It was in the fact that, even as I sat there trying to understand him, Amarjeet's mind had already become a vast, empty cavern where humanity had once lived. He was no longer a child. He was something else, something far more terrifying. In the days that followed my sessions with Amarjeet, I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed about the human condition. We like to think that there is a clear divide between good and evil, that people are shaped by their circumstances, that with the right interventions, anyone can be healed. But Amarjeet proved otherwise. He was not a victim of his environment, nor was he a product of some deep trauma. No, he was a child born into the world with a mind that was already a dark abyss. What I realized, painfully, was that there are some people whose minds are so deeply fractured that no amount of kindness, no amount of love could ever repair them. They are the monsters we least expect, the ones who wear the skin of innocence while their souls are rotting from within. Amarjeet Sada was not just a product of his circumstances. He was a reminder that in a world built on faith, trust, and the belief in the goodness of people, there can still exist a darkness so profound, so terrifying, that it can only be understood through the lens of horror. Even now, as I reflect on my time with Amarjeet Sada, I find myself haunted by the question of what truly lies within the human mind. We look at people every day, we trust them, we believe in their inherent goodness. But sometimes beneath the surface, there is a void, an emptiness so deep that it can only be filled by the most monstrous of actions. India, where there is rich culture, its traditions of love and faith, still there are people who are monstrous, people who even have faith to the darkness that can fester within a human soul. For every person who offers a kind word, there could be another lurking in the shadows, their mind consumed by a horror that is beyond comprehension. Amarjeet's story is a warning, a reminder that the greatest monsters are not always the ones we fear on the surface. Sometimes they are the ones who walk among us, silent, still, and waiting to show us the true capacity for evil that exists within the human mind. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying thing of all.